Okay, so it's very interesting to be presenting after an antivirus vendor was presenting their decision. Um, because Lumension has always been pursuing a very different approach in terms of securing your endpoints. With antivirus vendor, you're always very reactive. So you find out that you've just been infected, well, almost in real time or no real time, but then you're dealing with consequences. Lumension is a very different vendor from any traditional endpoint, well, blacklisting vendor that is offering their solutions on the market. We are about proactivity. We're about trying to prevent or trying to help customers prevent incidents from happening. So we are offering so-called defense in depth strategy, which goal is to provide a multi-layered approach to securing the endpoints, making sure that you're really properly patched so you don't really have gaps in your security, making sure that only authorized applications can execute, making sure your devices are controlled. I mean, whatever you're plugging into your computer, that we have a strict access what kind of devices you can use and what kind of data you can copy onto those devices. And eventually we do have an antivirus, but at the end of my presentation you'll understand that our technology is not relying on the antivirus component to act as a frontline defense. In general, when I was delivering more theoretical presentation yesterday about risk management, about being proactive in terms of securing your infrastructure, I was mostly comparing blacklisting approach to the whitelisting approach. Now with blacklisting approach, you have to have a signature in order to identify a virus. Well, marketing might come with, very interesting phrases like, well, dynamic blacklisting, whatever fancy words they may choose. But in either way, we have to identify somehow virus. And then act somehow when it gets discovered. There are only three ways how an attack can succeed, or how can an attacker penetrate your network, or a virus can infect you. It's through vulnerabilities, if your system have gaps in your security, if they're improperly configured, meaning that you have certain, well, rogue processes running, and by means of deception, let's say social engineering. When user is being tricked into launching something that, well, has a malicious purpose, right, of infecting the machine. So well, if we look at all the best practices, recommendations from a different analysts, you'd everywhere discover that the foundational approach to security has to start with patching. Patching provides fixes to existing vulnerabilities. So imagine your house. Your door is broken, your windows are broken, there are no locks in your house. Would a burglar break in? Of course. So first thing, you have to make sure that, well, your vulnerabilities are fixed. Long now are the days when Microsoft was only associated with vulnerabilities. Nowadays, well, more than 70, almost 80% of vulnerabilities are being discovered on a third-party application. So it's not only Microsoft World anymore. We have different browsers, we have different readers, we have a lot of different applications that we have to take care of. And they have most vulnerabilities. So Lumension Defense in Depth Strategy, or Lumension Endpoint Management and Security Suite as a solution, really starts with the first layer of defense, making sure that, well, your infrastructure becomes resistant to attacks, infections that happen through vulnerabilities or through exploitation of vulnerabilities. So the product is very easy to install. You literally have to click next, next, next 13 times. At a certain next, you have to enter username and password, and you get things up and running. The system would then replicate. It means it would check with licenses to what the user is licensed to use, which modules. Right, it would download whatever updates are required, and you would come up with a similar interface, except that during new installation it's going to be empty. So the first step is to discover your assets. So there is a built-in discovery method which allows you to discover assets or discover and install agents. Now the solution is a build having in mind the ease of use and also ease of deployment in big enterprises. So it does come with one single integrated agent, and every module in the system is actually using this one agent. There is a unified communication via port 80 and via SSL. So there is no clutter with running multiple agents in order to get multi-layer security. And there is one single management interface, as you can see here, with role-based access control. So you can play and assign certain features and functions to users based on what they need to know. So once you discover your assets, you would start seeing the endpoints. Now bear in mind that this implementation is a live one. It's running on my virtual environment. So I only have the agent installed on the same machine as the server. So once you get the agent deployed, you would start receiving the information about the endpoint. And that means, okay, let me check. That, well, each and every component would start working according to policies that you start setting up. Now again, this is a very interesting approach of the whitelisting being implemented in the product. So it's not really that we start scanning something for viruses and, well, make our systems, let's say, very much utilized. The first thing we start doing is actually gathering the inventory information. So after, well, certain time of deploying the agents, Discover Applicable Updates service would feed a central server with the information on the inventory. So you'd see services that are running in your environment. You'd be able to check for hardware. In that case, if you see, I don't know, RAM, which devices have what kind of, how much megabytes of RAM, so full hardware inventory. Then you would look at the software inventory. Many people or many customers are really surprised what they really find in the infrastructure. With iTunes, with different versions of really non-business related software running. So based on the inventory information, we start analyzing the endpoints, looking for vulnerabilities. So during vulnerability assessment, and again after the inventory is provided, it's done automatically. You would, within certain time, 10, 20 minutes, you would start looking at your critical vulnerabilities in your infrastructure. Now, this is the first layer of defense in depth approach, patch and remediation components. So it's dealing with vulnerabilities and packages available which are meant to fix these vulnerabilities. So as you can see here, I'm looking at critical and not superseded vulnerabilities which are applicable to my environment. Now bear in mind that patching doesn't only cover Microsoft vulnerabilities. We're covering different flavors of Unix, Linux, Mac, well, Windows apparently, many versions, all the versions starting Windows XP, and also a huge list of third-party applications. So everything is in one place, and you see your patches that you need to deploy. Some of them are critical, and you can also expand and check which CVEs, that stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, which vulnerabilities a certain patch is fixing. Now, you want to deploy these patches, you click on Deploy button, and you have a wizard that would guide you through in order to get these patches deployed into your environment. Now bear in mind with a number of let's say, operating system vendors or third-party application vendors. We have agreements, so all the patches that they're publishing are applicable to certain products. We get them, we test them, and we make them available for our customers. So no longer the patching is really a hard and cumbersome task. I mean, Lumension really provides control of the way you deploy this with a lot of scheduling options, with mandatory baselining, but well, there is quite a lot of time required to go through each feature and function. We not only provide patches that are fixing vulnerabilities, we're providing software packages. Let's say together with this deployment, you perhaps would like to, I don't know, implement the VMware machine, well, I don't know, version 10 perhaps. Here you accept the agreement on behalf of the end user, and eventually you'd see the deployment workflow. So we use chaining, so every package is chained. We know the sequence, how patches should be deployed in your company. Bear in mind that we're suspending a reboot between deploying packages, so it means that, well, you can see here 20 packages that you need to deploy. If you deploy these with WSUS, you might be required to reboot the machine 5 or 6 times. In this case, the reboot will just happen in the very end. And also you can change the behavior or add additional options into how each patch is being deployed. So for instance, in this case, I want to suppress a chain reboot and make sure that VMware workstation is being deployed together with these patches. You click on next. You then set up if you want to notify a user about the deployment, or you want to notify when the computer needs to be restarted. You can actually allow user to snooze the restart in case needed. Yep, and that's it. You click on finish. It's so easy. I mean, when dealing with a lot of customers, everybody tells it's so hard to patch systems. No, it's not, as long as you have a tool. I mean, we've been on patch management market for more than 20 years. We have more than 4 or 5,000 customers that are using this technology for patching. In Central Europe, in Scandinavia, be it big hosting companies, big outsourcing companies, right? They're utilizing this technology really to make this task, well, quite easy. It's not really hard, as long as you understand what you're doing. It's not really like turn it on and forget patching. If you're looking for such a solution that works in a similar way as WSUS, which you turn it on and forget and pray that nothing goes wrong when you're deploying critical patches, we're not about that. We provide visibility, we provide the content, we provide the full control how you patch your Windows and non-Windows environment, as well as the application, the third-party applications. Again, I'm running bi-weekly webinars and doing a full overview of the software every Tuesday. Please make sure to contact WSH or RelNet to get an invite, or ask, well, to give you my business card, so you could drop me an email. And there I do a full overview. So when I have 1 hour to present the solution, there's definitely more features. Few of them I will simply mention. No matter that we have the broadest coverage of Windows and non-Windows patches and patches for third-party applications, many customers need to have an ability to customize and create their own patches. So we have a content wizard as an add-on to the solution. It comes together with patch remediation. It allows all customers to create customized patches, modify the existing ones, modify system settings that they can deploy. They can even create removal packages. So let's say a simple use case. You manage your endpoints, you look at inventory. You're not really happy about somebody using, well, Skype. Maybe there's nothing wrong with Skype, but in certain, well, computers, it should not be used. So, you look, okay, here's the computer, which is LEMS 8, where Skype is installed. You might see tens of computers here where Skype is running. What you do then, you open content wizard, uninstall wizard option, and you actually point that to this computer saying, well, it's LAMS 8. What we do, we extract a fingerprint of this software, and we create removal package, which you then deploy across your enterprise and get certain software simply removed from your infrastructure. It's that easy and that elegant. There's also a wake on LAN feature built in the product. So normally in a big environment, your company would have a patching window or maintenance window for your computers and your servers. So you can schedule a certain task, certain deployment to run exactly, start, I don't know, at 3 a.m. and finish, let's say, by, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. Yeah, dependent on when this maintenance window start and end. So there are mandatory baselines which you would tell that a certain level, and this is where you start working not with individual endpoints, but with groups. Let's say here I have, well, system groups that are being populated based on the agent information. Different Windows machine, based on IP collection, virtual machines if they are discovered. Normally users create, or customers create their own custom groups. Usually they do it by, like for all departments, based on locations, based on types of computers or machines. Why? Because then it's very easy to apply the policies. You can, for instance, tell that, well, for computers that are far away in Central Asia or Caucasia, in, I don't know, Georgia or Kazakhstan, the bandwidth is quite low. So whenever we're deploying packages there, the package size should not be more than 100, I don't know, kilobytes. So you're, slowly sending that information out. I mean, it's very, very flexible in terms of configuring that type of settings. But nonetheless, once you see their group, you can start applying mandatory baselines. So meaning that for a certain level of technology or for a certain group, you can create a mandatory baseline which ensures that certain patches are always deployed on a certain technology. So that means if you're still running Windows XP machines, and I'm certain that there are, well, hundreds, if not thousands of customers still running, working on Windows XP, patches are still available in the product. I mean, well, new patches are not added unless you pay Microsoft for, extended service. But in general, you can still patch them. You can simply add, based on the technology or based on the certain computers now, you can filter out applicable updates and make sure that if you plug in a new machine into your environment and, well, based on the inventory information is being classified as in this case, let's say Windows 2012 or be the Windows XP machine, certain patches would be deployed. And again, it's that easy. You simply set up out of those, well, 13,000 patches that are available. We now, by clicking on the filter, we would see ones applicable for the endpoints that are in the group. Yeah, and we would add it. You can filter, well, find out ones that you need. Or even you can include the pieces of software that you need to make sure are always deployed. So how patching works then, to sum up, right? The agent, once installed, provides information about the inventory. Based on that information, we do vulnerability checks in order to figure out which vulnerabilities are present or which packages need to be installed that are fixing those vulnerabilities, right? Based on inventory information, a resource is being classified into one of the system groups, or you can manually add to a custom groups for, well, management purposes. If that is being assigned to a certain system group, automatically mandatory baselining kicks in, and you no longer have to manually set up the patches. These will be automatically deployed. So Lumension patch remediation is a very well-known product on the market. I mean, previously our company was called PatchLink. So for many years, PatchLink, hadn't been doing anything except working in the patch management area. Then, when PatchLink was merged with the market leader in device control and application control, the company called Secure Wave, and some of you might have heard the product called Sanctuary, right? Then the brand Lumension was born. And then we started integrating different modules or different products which do help customers with proactive security management. So patch management is usually considered to be the first layer in providing defense in depth approach or multi-layered approach, because what it allows you is to reduce the surface for available attacks. And once you achieve that, you literally fix or you mitigate risk very significantly. The risk that a virus or an attack would own you through vulnerabilities and through misconfigurations or through gaps in security. Now, in order for any virus or any attack to do harm, it's not only required for them to penetrate your, perimeter, your infrastructure, but also launch something. And this is a big game changer once we start speaking about antivirus, which in that case would try to find the virus based on the signature or whatever marketing DNA approach they might come up with, right? But they still need to identify. If it's a targeted attack, you would never have a signature. And you can never expect to have a signature if somebody's actually targeting you. Trust me. I mean, I used to work as a risk management consultant for many years. So if we start analyzing the application, okay, of malware development life cycle, you would understand that nobody is building one virus. The concept is being built. Then you get, I don't know, 100,000 different versions created. The code gets obfuscated. And that is being sent through all existing AV solutions. Hackers are not stupid people, right? They do have AV and they test it prior to releasing them. And once they have a source code which no AV can catch, then that source code is being used for a targeted attack, whatever it may be. Maybe the attack is not required. Maybe with social engineering you can actually get the password from the user by just speaking and pretending to be the admin. So the goal is then how to change the way you think. We no longer, with the whitelisting, we no longer need to deal with millions of viruses. We only need to start dealing with authorized applications which must run in our environment. So the next layer in the defense in depth approach is called application control, or application whitelisting. The product is built, unlike any other traditional, let's say, application control products that really require a customer to build the list, or the white list per every device. We start with auditing, and that's all policy. I mean, it's so abstract but so elegant that we're starting to log execution of a non-authorized applications. If you start doing it right now, all of them would be unauthorized. So you let this auditing process run, and perhaps after 1 or 2 hours, you'd come back and look for application control log queries. So that's like a real world scenario. Yeah, please ignore the denied ones. You would now see all of them are allowed. So what would you normally do? You would run such a query for computers belonging to a certain department where critical or sensitive information is. I mean, you start one step at a time. We had certain cases where the company had, got a warning that it will be hacked. So, thousands of computers had to be brought under lockdown within, weeks. Challenging but possible. So, normally you would run the query per department and you would see, is there any abnormal activity? Do we see some weird applications which we don't have a clue about? In normal circumstances, your computers would be configured the way they should be. Your antivirus software would ensure that the viruses which it can detect, with a big probability that, well, it would miss many viruses. Nonetheless, you think that, well, computers are working fine, the applications that are supposed to be running. So what would you do then? You wouldn't really start creating, the whitelist, adding these files one by one, because you would see thousands of them. I mean, this is one machine, Windows Server, and it contains more than 25,000 files. Imagine how many files you'd have in a big enterprise. But your goal is not really to play with the files. Your goal is to make sure that your computers are protected against known viruses, against unknown viruses, and that no unauthorized application can execute. So beautiful. When AV solution is hardly capable of protecting you against only known viruses. So what you do? You think that, well, I checked all of these 50 computers in this query. Everything seems fine. I don't see any abnormal behavior. I don't see any weird applications. Even if I do see some rogue applications, or applications that I wouldn't want to see, nonetheless, I might get back to my application log, application policy, and edit. And from auditing mode, I would switch to a lockdown. The user wouldn't even feel the difference. But in terms of security, there's huge difference. That means that if you have 50 computers that might be running slightly different flavors or version of applications, right? But they're running properly, and you bring all 50 to a lockdown, users would continue working with these computers as if nothing happened. But if anybody after that tried to copy, existing viruses or unknown viruses, or try to install unwanted applications, nothing would execute. Why? Because these are not authorized. So it's a big game changer for AV vendors, and trust me, traditional AV vendors, they hate us. Because what is easier now, still to try and invest millions of dollars into marketing and try to tell customers that there are so many viruses in the wild. There are so many billions and millions of viruses, and you definitely need an AV solution to get yourself protected. 7 million new viruses are being identified every month. That's almost 3 per second. So, do we still believe marketing? Or do we really have critical thinking and can question ourselves? Who can develop 3 signatures per second? Nobody. The whitelisting is a different approach. We no longer have to deal with 7 million viruses. We simply need to deal with 20, 30, big enterprise, 50 business applications, and whitelist them and lock things down. The computers would function as supposed, but you no longer need to scan your computers in a real time or very oftenly to find viruses. It's one agent. You have the whitelisting, you lock it down, nothing can execute. Well, it is that easy, but you have to have further step, in mind. Whenever you lock things down, it's not only about making the whitelist or locking down your machine. It's also about managing the change. With your 20 business applications that you might be running, there will be updates. So the product, as Lumension, we support, various ways of managing that change. Everything you do through a patch management system would automatically be added to the whitelist. If you're using third-party application, or let's say WSUS, you would normally tell that a certain process is trusted to introduce the change. You might add a certain digital signature, let's say from Microsoft, And as a result, all the changes that are, well, all the files that are being signed by Microsoft would execute. Again, with a certain level of risks, you know, every certificate can be faked. You can allow certain users to make the choice, to make the decision to run the software no matter the warning. So if an administrator is allowed to authorize an application, whenever he launches something which is not in the whitelist, he would be notified. Mr. Administrator, you're trying to execute an application which is not approved by our information security policy. Now, provided you accept the risk and consequences from this disciplinary action to termination of your employment contract, you can still launch this application. Some users would think twice before they launch this application. If they know what they're doing, they would click OK, but that information would be logged. And if that piece of software would try to execute something else, if it's malicious, it won't. Because the admin would again be asked, do you want to execute this file is trying to execute another file. Do you want that? No, this is suspicious. So that's the beauty about the application control. A big game changer for everybody. A big changer for any AV vendor, right? Because it literally ruins their business. You no longer need to be afraid of viruses because you only need to deal with authorized applications. So that's the second layer of security, and a few more minutes to go through the two remaining modules. Device control policies. Surely everybody has heard of device control. What do we do with devices that we plug to our computer, and how we control ports? Well, there are products on one side that can only allow or block certain class. Let's say you block USB. Or you can have the product, as Lumension, device control, which is very granular. So you can have so different options. You can limit, you can set up the daily limit for people to be able to copy to, let's say, external hard drive or USB flash. You can have policies if the computer is online, so meaning if I get my laptop connected in the corporate environment, I would have one policy. If I bring it home, I might not be allowed to copy anything to external media, not even charging my iPhone using USB ports, not speaking about, well, the synchronization with iTunes. You can have schedule access based on timing. So let's say I want my user to be able to copy not more than, let's say, 20 megabytes per day. I want to make sure that, well, first thing, I would block all access if I connect just any regular USB, which is not encrypted. My next policy, if it's encrypted, and the user would be asked, do you want to encrypt it? I would allow them only to read information from media. Maybe write it, but I would ensure the whitelisting based on file filters or file types. Encrypt, decrypt, that's fine. So I would say that I'm allowing only Microsoft Office files, or maybe not even that, being copied. So I could only allow doc files, Microsoft Word files. You can do it one way or another way. So you allow import and export. You can only say that, well, I allow copy here, but not copy out of the computer. And if I do that, I would do a file name only logs of the file one is being read, so coming from a device to my computer. But if somebody would try to copy a corporate document to an external media, I would do a full file content. Why? Well, for forensics purposes. If incident happened, we would be able to track it down, who did it, when, and what exactly was the information. So you would say, well, file type's interesting. I would change JPEG or exe to doc file and would copy that. No way. We're getting into the internals of files, checking headers. So you can't really trick the product and make it work. And it's again not based on the blacklisting. we don't want executables from being copied. No, the product here again is based on the whitelist. So you can do that with all the classes, granular approach. One of the few products that is NATO approved. We have this product or a standalone device product used in governments, in different ministries, even in secret services, right? It fits 140 level 2 certified. So if you ever thought of getting something, well, you thought of DLP or you thought of device control, make sure to test it. The biggest customer, for instance, one of the biggest is, well, Barclays, right? We have, if you Google, you'd find an official case. More than 100,000 computers are using this, Lumension device control. And the last component, of course. There are more features and functions. Antivirus. Why the hell do we need it still in this product when there are so many layers? Imagine a house, right? With patch management, you made sure you have good doors, good windows, good locks, your house is locked. But you can't make it like a vacuum box, right? There would still be some small gaps which would make a very challenging for a burglar to get in. Then you have application control, the whitelisting technology. So imagine that in your house, only certain people or animals are allowed to move. So it's okay for you, your wife, your girlfriend, your mistress, your dog, your cat to move, but nobody else would. But if you open the window, or if you just open the door, the wind might blow in you a virus. Be it a leaf from the outside, dust, it would be harmless because it's not allowed to move, to execute. But it still would be there, lying like dust, like trash on the floor. So why do we need AV? Or why do we need any AV? We don't care which one you're using, either ours, which comes free of charge with the product, or you can continue using your own one. It's needed just to clean your house, make it clean. No matter that these viruses are harmless, they can't do anything in your infrastructure. You still need to get rid of them to make sure that, well, you somehow by accident don't transfer that to anywhere else. So this is a short overview of LEM's platform. Now, as with every product, if you want to give it a test drive, I'll be here. You can contact me. I can issue the license immediately. We have WSH, RelNet as our partners. All of them have LEMs installed up and running in their infrastructure if you want to test it. We can give you access to the software that you can do it yourself. My technical engineer or pre-sales engineer will get in contact with you, would help to set it up, test it, right? Many customers that do, they would eventually understand that, well, we have been paying for more than 15 years for AV solution that has never ever been efficient, while the whitelisting is really changing the concept of how we're securing the endpoint. And remember that endpoint is one of the weakest links in your environment. Nobody would hire a tank to attack your data center. The weakest link is the endpoint. Why? Because this is the place where people or human beings, which are also susceptible for errors, to deception, they work with a technology that has so many vulnerabilities on it. They have, endpoint has most of the third-party applications, which have 80% of all vulnerabilities. And human being is working with the most sensitive information. So trust me, if you are being targeted, it's hardly believable that hacker will target your server. Trust me. It will target you, your administrator. And means are very different. From social engineering to using, I don't know, just a knife and a fork, asking for the admin password for your data, or in case somebody would get hurt. It's easy. So I thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see you amongst the, well, as our customers, or at least in the beginning as evaluators of the product, and would gladly help you do that. Thank you.